Orlando Wood, thank you for joining me today. A long postponed discussion. We've been trying to figure out logistically how on different sides of the Atlantic we can finally have what I'm hoping will be a very interesting conversation about AI.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Primarily about AI.
Sure.
So the first thing that I really want to ask you is, what are you up to? What's happening? Whose interests are you pursuing?
Whose interests are, the answer is always multiple interests. I have a business, so I'm obviously pursuing the interests of the business. I think I'm part of a broader conversation about AI use within the creative industries, where I have a particular position on that. And then I also work with a lot of entertainment clients and advertising clients, and they have their own take and needs regarding these using tools within the entertainment community and the ad community. So we take a lot of our leads from them and how they want to use it. The entertainment community especially has taken a very, I think, defensible, but I think, they've taken this very seriously, the notion of AI, what it means, and the obviously massive copyright provenance issues at play. And, so yes, it's unfortunately not a binary answer, but
no, I wasn't looking for a binary answer. I was actually it was a broader question than that, about what Kubrick does and where you fit into those relationships. Do you see yourself as a go-between, or are you leading production? What does your company do?
So just a bit of history. Primarily what we did is Kubrick itself started out as a screenplay management platform using AI. That product is now in use by a bunch of over 70 production companies and studios. We were the first ones to crack it with an early version of GPT. Back then, it was a very tricky thing to do. There was a lot of programmatic work involved because a standard GPT at the time only had an input token length of about 2,500 tokens, whereas a standard screenplay is about 70,000 tokens. So we did a lot of chunking work. But that got us in a lot of rooms and a lot of access to some of the very important people who are struggling with the use of AI in these environments. So that software product put us in those rooms. And then what we found was we and they had a very similar view on the risks and the copyright issues involved. For me, my mother was a novelist. Her life's work was in the book's 3 corpus. So I was very annoyed by that. I think that she would have been furious. And all the rooms we were walking into were executives who were very concerned about what AI meant, what it meant that their clients and their work was stolen from. But I think that they also had to contend with a secondary reality, which is so many of these entertainment companies were slow to the shift, the last technological shift of digital distribution and social media. And that has really, in many ways, kind of eaten their lunch. And so they have to keep 2 competing realities at play at any given time, which is, one, they have created the work that has been stolen from, while at the same time they recognize that they absolutely can't be asleep at the switch during a second technological revolution, and they're concerned about that. What we primarily do is from that initial SaaS product, we then met a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jonathan Frankel. He's the chief data scientist in charge of neural networks at Databricks. And he and the reason we gravitated towards one another is he said, it has always been possible to train these models without any copyright data involved. There are courts around the world that have publicly available legal texts that is more than enough tokens to train a very effective language model. And I think that just underscores how egregious the theft of the large models was, because it was not necessary. But I think they knew that the stuff of life, poetry and literature, was what's going to make these things sticky and was what's going to make them feel more like human past the Turing test, et cetera. But we then built the first of its kind language model for the industry using Dr. Jonathan Frankel is now on our board of advisors. And he gave us access to his model, the DBRX model, which contained no prior copyright training data in its foundational training set. We then fine-tuned it, and we spent about $150,000 fine-tuning this model on a what we called a moral model. We now call it Kubrick 1. But that was the first of its kind for the entertainment industry. And I think that, whereas our SaaS product got us into a lot of rooms, I think that us putting our money where our mouth is in terms of creating a model specifically for entertainment that didn't steal from artists, I think that gave us a lot more credibility that we were acting in what we felt was the best way to move forward in a tricky situation.
Can I pull you back to what you said about what Frankel achieved? Because it sounds very interesting. Are you saying, I'm not sure that you are, but are you saying that effectively the OpenAI in developing ChatGPT and Anthropic in terms of developing Claude, are you suggesting they could have done that without breaching copyright?
Yes.
And why didn't they?
I think they knew it just was going to be a bit clunky. It was going to sound like talking to a lawyer, And I think, and again, I think it highlights how egregious that and proves to me that it was theft. I don't believe in the fair use argument. I think it's bull. I think my mom wouldn't have agreed with it. And we know lots of people within the entertainment community that don't agree with it. And certain people that we met with, right around that time, we met with Andre Vargas and his team at CAA. And they've taken a very dim view. Many production company studios agree that for workflow management tools, AI is a perfectly reasonable thing to use because you're not competing with creatives using their own work. CAA said, absolutely not. Our artists are the ones who have been stolen from. We will not use any tool. But at the same time, once again, they're the biggest talent management agency on the planet. They know that they need to stay up to date with modern technology. And since we created our model, there are now about 45 different models on the market that are good at various things and bad at various things. It's not a one-stop shop solution like a GPT or Anthropic is, but there are options. The market has matured when it comes to copyright provenance and having options. And there's one video model named Moon Valley by Asteria that is has no known copyright data in its foundational training set. All licensed material. All of the studios are engaging with Moon Valley. It's run by a guy named Bryn Musher. He's Dave Egger. Oh, I've forgotten Dave's name. Anyway, but they're a good bunch.
I mean, we're sort of jumping horses a bit here. We might come back, but let's since you brought that up, let's concentrate that. How's that been achieved?
I mean, I'm not an expert on Moon Valley specifically. Sure. I mean, I can talk to our model. The model that we
do. You have a generative video model then?
We do not.
No, I didn't.
So I can't speak to.
No, fair enough. If it's outside your knowledge,
absolutely.
Yeah. But it seems it's intriguing. I mean, I think clearly one of the difficulties which everyone faces if they take a moral stand on this, and it's interesting hearing you describe yours, is that it's in a way you kind of have to take someone's word for it when they serve you up with a slice of cake, whether or not the cake was made with stolen eggs,
right? Because
in reality you can't tell. And I think certainly I think it's fair to say, trying to stay on the right side of the law here, that OpenAI have actually been pretty open about their own dishonesty when it comes to this. They've admitted that essentially they poured a lot of copyrighted material 100%. In, and their plead is that we couldn't have built the model without doing that. And in a sense, that's, I mean, to me, it's a bit like a burglar saying, but I couldn't have become rich if I hadn't stolen stuff from people's homes. It doesn't excuse it. So it's interesting to hear you say that. But so obviously, so you can't speak to
the video model.
The video model, that's fine. But in terms of the models that you've developed, you say that they wouldn't be capable of replacing the chat models, which have become obviously ubiquitous. I mean, everyone's using them. I use them. I think, in a sense, it's up to the individual user to sort of figure out how they're going to use them. But that fundamental question of how they've been built doesn't go away. So I actually applaud you for developing models which have dealt with that issue. That's great.
Thank you.
Really is. But I suppose because I don't think they would have done it. I mean, there's the moral aspect to what they've done, but there's also the workload aspect to what they've done. They wouldn't have done that unless they felt it was the secret source of what they developed.
I think it is,
which you've also confirmed, because of the way in which the chatbot responds to people is built on the sort of the largeness of the large language models that they've built.
I mean, our model is great at some things. It's iffy on others. It talks, at least at the start, it talked very much like a lawyer. We got it to a place where it was a little bit better. Now with the additional models on the market, you're sort of picking and choosing. You've got to get to know the models and go, that one's really great at dealing with characters. That one's really great at dealing with summary. That one's really great at, and you're sort of cobbling together, an amalgam of options. And you're sort of Frankensteining it a little bit.
I mean, this is clearly quite a niche area that you're talking about. So this isn't public facing, and I think what we're ascertaining here is that there's a world of difference between the models which have been built for the general public, which sit at an interesting crossroads anyway, because there's a massive issue with them figuring out how they're going to monetize those. And and again, I
that's something I think we're not talking about nearly enough.
No, I mean, I'm happy to bring that into into this discussion. Well, let's talk about that then, because obviously you are an insider to some extent. Well, what is your view on what is likely to happen next with those products?
I think they're coming after everything. I mean, I think that OpenAI is potentially going to have to IPO at over $1 trillion, which no company has ever done before. In order to justify that kind of valuation, they have to come after every big industry on the planet: law, finance, gambling, sports, entertainment, advertising. These are huge sectors that they have to compete in. And so when we advocate, I suppose, for creative people, or I seriously focus on creative companies. But when we advocate for it, so much of our job is around governance and security. It's if you feed your company's data into somebody's, or you don't give your company a safe alternative, assistants will be sending off your scripts, your business cases, your HR reports, your finance reports. Not just assistants, department heads will be doing that on their own personal accounts. That data is now in training sets for OpenAI. You have handed them your very valuable first-party data, and they will be using that when they come after these industries. And I think we don't talk enough about how they are unprofitable, and they need to turn a profit. And so I think that so much of what we do is there are safe ways to use these tools. You can engage with higher trust companies that are incentivized monetarily towards trust. I'm not saying they're trustworthy for any old reason. They're incentivized towards it. But AWS Bedrock hosts Claude. Microsoft Azure hosts OpenAI. If it were ever found that data is not going to these data ravenous and unprofitable companies that we see as low trust companies. I think Microsoft, AWS, these are higher trust American companies that handle FedRAMP high data or classified data, HIPAA data or medical data. They've been doing that for years, and they are trustworthy in that respect. So it is possible to pick up these tools in a safe manner. And so much of what we do is workflow management more than we necessarily do creative execution. But yeah, that's where we go to, because I don't think they just pulled off the largest copyright theft of all time. I don't think they're trustworthy now.
No.
I think they maybe have more governance, and they're SOC 2 and ISO certified and all those sorts of things. But again, the people running, Sora just closed down. That just shows you how quickly these companies sort of can't be trusted. 6 months ago, they were like, Sora's going to be the greatest thing. We've got this deal with Disney. And then suddenly they're like, shit, Claude is eating our lunch. We've got to pivot. Bye. And even Dario Mode from Anthropic kind of saying that he won't, have Claude choose whether to kill people or whatever else. I'm not so thrilled that we have to trust a CEO of a tech company as our last barrier of defense of militarizing these tools. I think I'm glad he did that. I respect him for that. But at the same time, is that what we're relying on? And is Sam Altman going to do the same? I don't think so. Yeah. Sorry, I went into war there. I'm terribly sorry.
But I think, but in a way, in doing that, and it shows how quickly, when we have a conversation like this, we move into areas of greater importance even than whether or not a screenwriter is getting a fair rate of pay for their work and so
100%.
on. So, I think there are, and I think what it demonstrates more than anything is how easily these tech companies have stepped into an unregulated space, and
100%.
the regulators are scrambling to catch up, and so far so bad, really.
Well, I mean, you only have to look at things like revenge porn only being regulated like 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, people have been uploading horrifying things of people that they know since AOL was using dial-up. That just shows how unprepared our regulators are to deal with these things. I mean, there's a knowledge gap, obviously, but there's also just a speed of process gap. I mean, the move fast and break things crowd are going to be on to the next thing before you've regulated the first thing they came out with 3 years ago.
Yeah. One thing I noticed, there was something you posted the other day that I thought was quite interesting, because you talked, I think, and I'm paraphrasing, so forgive me and please correct me if I've got this wrong, but you seem to be saying that some of the bigger media companies are now starting to equip themselves to protect themselves against the intrusion and copyright infringement of AI, but that smaller companies, there would be a sort of, I think your suggestion was there would be a trickle down effect, that this was part of a broader development. I mean, how would you characterize that, if I've summed it up correctly?
Well, I wouldn't say that there's a trickle down effect.
That definitely wasn't your phrase.
But I think that's what I'm advocating for, is there is an IT skills gap in creative companies. When I started out as an in-house editor at Wieden & Kennedy in Amsterdam, I sort of became a de facto IT guy, because it was like, oh, the young kid who knows about computers, he'll do our IT, or he'll provision our laptops, or whatever it is. And when I was running Biscuit, we sort of operated like that, and we had an IT services, company that we called every once in a while, but they were not equipped, and they were not monitoring our systems constantly. And I think that's what needs to fill the gap. People need to either hire an IT person who understands these things, or an IT services company like we are as well. So my advocacy does have some.
We can show your business card at this point during the video.
Exactly, wonderful. Thank you very much. But I think that security and governance are now so important, because you're putting your creative ideas out there. You're putting your business information, into these models. And I think that, large corporations like the big media companies, they have really stringent IT policies and procurement policies. And, that was what was wonderful about getting led into the Warner Brothers Accelerator program, is they had a really defined system for how to make sure that you were operating in a really secure way. We couldn't go any further until we were SOC 2 certified and things like that. And those things are becoming increasingly important, I think, because otherwise you're risking giving away things to companies who don't deserve
I suppose, I mean, and that's really what the question that I was asking. Obviously corporations like Warner Brothers and other big corporations have the resources to protect themselves in that way. Smaller companies don't. So do you think there's going to be a developing gap between the companies that can protect themselves and the companies that can't?
I think it's reasonably easy to do oneself. I mean, we teach people how to do it. It's there is nothing I do from a security and governance perspective that is special or unique or proprietary. It's just, I think that what I bring is a subject matter expertise to production, to comic books, to the things that I have certain subject matter expertise, and as well our engineers do. But there is nothing, just hosting your model on or hitting a hosted model on a cloud provider is not an incredibly technical thing to pull off. But I think that we're also now seeing AI bleed into people creating their own software development tools. That if you have something that you're going to be using in your company, you're going to have to upkeep it. So yes, I think there is definitely a gap where some people won't invest in it. Some people will. Some people won't have the money. And I think that's one of the things that upsets me about this conversation, or not this conversation, but in general, is that I feel that we're still reeling from the last technological evolution. And everybody, we have a thing that I said the other day, which is the UK government said the UK creative economy is growing at nearly 2 times the rest of the economy. But most of the people I speak to aren't feeling that.
No.
It's the social media creators and that economy that's growing very fast. But the traditional industry of which we're a part and we love very much is not feeling that benefit. And so a lot of times people are sort of running into these tools for cost saving because, they're already watching margins deplete. And I just, maybe that can be helpful. But I think they need to be secure in that process.
Okay. Well, let's. One of the interesting things, and it is a slight contradiction, because I think there are times when it feels as though you're, in a sense, advocating for a broader acceptance of the use of AI, right. And yet during this conversation it feels like you're more temperate about that in a sense you recognize that AI kept in its lane, kept in its own lane, which is not a position I would disagree with at all, for what it's worth.
Sure.
Not that we're here to discuss my opinion, we're here to discuss yours, of course. But
very kind.
But do you?
But I love your opinions on all this. This is the other thing. Is my position? Oh, sorry, you're about to ask a question.
By all means.
All right,
carry on with telling me how much you love my opinions, please.
But I think that your anger and everybody's anger is a real asset in this game.
Yeah.
And I think that where I advocate more is because I'm seeing a lot of people's anger shut them down from using these tools and being a part of the conversation. And I guess when I look at the rooms I've been in the last 3 years, I'm seeing creators pick up these tools and they're thrilled about it because they've never had the opportunities that we've had to get access to money, get access to opportunities from brands or whatever else to build a reel. They're just like, this is the first opportunity I've ever had. They're thrilled and they don't know any better. They don't have a respect for the industry. The other people who are in part of the conversation.
How do you feel? Okay,
sure.
I just want to interrupt you at that point. How do you feel about the people who are able to bypass the process of learning and figuring out their own artistic identity because they have access to a tool which enables them to spit out something that looks akin to something which has been created by someone who has years of experience?
Sure. I mean, I have sympathy for them. I think I have sympathy for the frustration that they must have felt as, interested creators all of these years. So I think what I'm
So
trying...
you have sympathy for who? Sorry,
the creators.
The original
have not
creators. Or the people who are using AI now?
No. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. When I sort of differentiate between creatives who are part of systems that require infrastructure.
We need a glossary, and you've just provided
exactly.
it.
So sorry.
Perfect. Okay.
But no, I have sympathy for that. I completely get where they're coming from, and it's very easy to stand the other side of a prompted output and say, I meant to do that. It's like, no, you didn't. That's not what was in your mind's eye. You've just seen something. It finally looks like something you like, and now you're saying you meant to do it. That's a very different process, but they're learning that regardless. And I guess my point is, creatives don't know any better. Finance people are making so much money they don't care. And the technologists are so obsessed with whether they can solve a problem, they're not really thinking about whether they should solve the problem.
Yeah.
And
we've all seen Jurassic Park. We know.
Yes, exactly.
We know how that story ends.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess my point is, I've seen so many people that I respect use their anger and their displeasure to shut down their interest and work within this space. And I think their anger is the thing that, other than their experience, anger is the thing that gives me the confidence that when they go towards a point on the horizon, they'll go somewhere that maybe I want to go, and that maybe will educate the other people at the table. And I guess I think that if not for the people with the hard-won experience showing us a new way to do it that is okay and ethical and respects what came before, I don't know who else is going to do it because nobody else has the experience. And so that's what I'm advocating for, is this community, not
I understand.
Burying one head's head in the sand.
It's an interesting idea in the sense that people are so angered by one part of the way in which the technology is being used that effectively they're rejecting, the reasonable uses. I actually thought on your panel last week at the British Arrows, the craft. Art of Craft, was it?
Yeah.
No, Art of Craft, that doesn't sound right. Whatever it was called.
It
was a very good day. And the discussion, I thought I really was very impressed with Darren O'Kelly and what he had to say from Untold Studios, because his distaste was kind of background, if you know what I mean. You felt as though he was appropriately lacking in broad enthusiasm, but at the same time he was also talking actually with great precision about the ways in which they have made it. So I think he represents the kind of thing you're talking about, I think, in terms of someone who perhaps by instinct is opposed to the use of AI, who has nonetheless found a fairly niche way of introducing it, but also the thing that came across more than anything else, I thought, was how cautious he's been about the way that they've implemented it. Yeah, and I think that speaks to what you're saying as well. However, I still, there's something about the way in which you just described the broader use of it. I don't share your view that it's kind of sweet that frustrated creatives who have arguably no talent are sort of able to bypass that problem by prompting a machine and then, in your lovely description actually, take ownership of something that it spits out and say, yeah, that's what I intended. That to me is such a corrupted version of the creative process that I think we need to make it culturally unacceptable. You don't seem to be miles from that position, but what would you say in response to that?
I think, again, I think we haven't seen great uses of it. And I think that the market then speaks for itself a little bit. And I think that, like, we're seeing a lot of it on social media. There's not a lot of it, in actual output from ad agencies end to end. Obviously, there was the McDonald's example and the Coca-Cola example. There are a few things. I thought the Daisy O2 thing that we had Morton from VCCP on was quite interesting.
It's a very interesting project, but I have to say I think it delineates entirely. It's an entirely different beast from because it's really dealing with AI as an editorial idea rather than rather than using it as a shortcut to do something you could otherwise do. And that may be the key, by the way.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think that, it's the AI is far enough up the creative strategy that it sort of works. And then you sort of overlook and they've been so honest about how far up it is that then you overlook the fact that the video you watch is end-to-end AI, which usually we call slop now. But I'm not seeing anything that's great, but that's also because there hasn't been, again, the people who I respect who know how to do something interesting haven't really picked up the tools that much. I mean, I spoke on my podcast to Rob Minkoff, who is the director of The Lion King, and he is, an animator who's undeniably learned at USC and Disney, created one of the greatest animated films of all time, and he's very excited. He's kind of like, I can just see how I can make more work. And, he's obviously using them much more like somebody like Darren O'Kelly, in different parts, creating little assets a lot faster or whatever else. And so I'm encouraged by those sorts of things and people who do have that hard-won expertise. But yes, I suppose I don't get mad at people who don't know for creating. I've always said that I think that creation is higher up Maslow's hierarchy of needs than I think people give it a lot of credit for. We don't just create when we're fat and happy. So much of us, we all were interns earning no money to get into this industry. There's, we care so much. And so I get it. But I suppose just on a human standpoint, I guess I feel sympathy.
Let me introduce an absurd idea, but a fun one.
Please.
Imagine if are you a parent?
No.
You're not a parent. Okay. So
working on it.
Okay, we're going to invent you a little child for the purposes of this.
Yeah.
Let's call him Oswald.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
So little Oswald comes home from school and he's got a little picture and he wants to put it on the fridge. He says, you know, can I put that on the fridge, Daddy? And you look at it and you think, it's not very good.
Right.
But, you know, he's only 3. He's only 4.
Yeah.
I'm actually hugely proud of him.
Yeah.
And it goes on thing. Has value.
100%.
It has value because of who did it, what the limitations on their ability were, and because it's part of how they learn to be better if they choose to, you know, go down the avenue of drawing stuff or whatever creative spur that creates.
100%.
So if little Oswald is able, he's got a little computer because you know, Daddy's got too much tech in the house, and he prompts his way to an image, which is way better, prints it out on the printer, and then says, can I put that on the fridge?
Yeah.
That's kind of where we are with these people.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, you know, my feeling a little bit is, taking the Oswald analogy, if Oswald falls down while trying to walk a bunch of times, I'm not going to go, you know, and I'm not sure walking's really for him. I think that, you know, maybe he's not a walker. We'll give up and that'll be fine. I think you go, okay, like this is.
But neither are you going to buy him a little motor car and then have him climb into it and pretend he can walk.
No, exactly. But I think that, like, I don't see the market applauding AI slop that's lazy.
You're right. I mean, the market hates it. And it's good.
It's one of the reasons Sora closed. I mean, they had a full end-to-end app that was just prompted slop. No, I mean, 10 users by the end. I mean, or something absurd. But, you know, I think that friction is so much a point of everything. And I believe that creatives want to create. And I think that whenever we solve everything, there will be a new horizon just the other side of it. And that's sort of, I'm trying to be an optimist, I suppose. I think that that's the thing, is I just want, my optimism means I want good people in the game, because I think that curiosity and optimism, I think I said this in my thing, is that those seem to me to be two of the most creative, or two of the tools that support creativity most, create the most fertile ground for creativity. And I know that we're all cynical and we're all, you know, tastemakers and whatever else, but I try to be as optimistic as I can be, and I'm more optimistic the more people who I know did it the hard way being a part of this conversation.
Yeah,
that makes me more optimistic.
Yeah, I mean I take your point there. I mean, I'm an optimist too, actually, and also I certainly wouldn't want anyone to feel as though this is about gatekeeping. I actually don't think it is at all. It's more about what we gain from not necessarily even doing things the hard way. I mean, in many respects. I mean, here's an interesting conversation I quite often have that speaks to this to some extent. I am, in my role as editor of David Reviews, quite frequently approached by the parents of teenagers or young people in their early 20s, and the parent will say to me, you know, little Oswald, he's grown up now.
Great.
Little Oswald wants to be a film director.
Yeah.
And my question my question to them has always been the same, which is, can you show me what they've made?
Yeah.
And usually the answer is, well, nothing yet. He wants 100%. To be a film director, but he's not actually doing anything yet. And for the current generation, there's no excuse. If you want to make something, we all have a tool in our pocket which is more powerful than anything that was available 100%. To me when I was their age. My worry is, obviously, as I'm sure you're anticipating, is that now little Oswald or Johnny or whoever it may be is able to fake it, and that seems to me to be problematic. I don't want it to be hard for people, but I do want them to appreciate there is a learning curve, and that's how you get better. That's how you get good.
Sure.
So your argument about, which is an interesting one, that it'll be interesting to see what happens when people who are already good at this turn their attention to these tools and start creating stuff in it. But what about the next generation? What if we have a generation who only know that way?
Well, listen, I mean, I got my start as an in-house editor. I was at film school at Columbia, and we had a day where an old school editor came in, and he glued, and he was trimming it on the, the editing machine, and he was gluing, film together. I made my living, my first job out of university at Wieden & Kennedy as an editor. I've never glued two pieces of film together. I did some video editing on Beta decks. Remember the old things, and then Final Cut Pro and Avid. So I think that my hope is that there will be new processes that get specificity, and specificity is what. And Darren said it at the thing. Specificity is what professional filmmaking is all about. Being able to say, I've got something in my mind's eye and I want to put it out. What I am encouraged by in that thing you brought up about, they'll be able to prompt something is, I think the last panel of the day at the Arrows Festival was a panel where a young kid got up there and he said, I was trying desperately to get $6,000 to make something because I believe that I have the ability to tell a broader story or execute more broadly. And I think that a little bit similar to the phone in your, a professional camera in your pocket analogy, if you're somebody who thinks of yourself as a storyteller, you'll be able to show whether you have a story that will fit a space opera, for example. And although you will not, I don't believe, have proven yourself to be a good cinematographer, and you won't prove yourself to be a good, filmmaker necessarily, you might be able to prove that you're a good storyteller, and you can figure out character, and you can figure out story arcs and character arcs and things like that. So, again, I still think we haven't seen anything that proves any of that's true, but I think. Whereas history doesn't, history rhymes a little bit. I hope that with more filmmakers proving, we're impressed by human effort and we're impressed by human achievement. So I suspect that will hopefully remain the same.
It'll be interesting, and I don't want to push you on this any further because I think we've probably exhausted it.
Sure.
But I do think it's interesting, and I think it remains to be seen whether this technology can be seen as simply like the next development, which is partly what you're suggesting in that. I think, essentially we moved from cutting, to digital, and no one, no harm was done. I think there may be a confusion between differences of degree and differences of kind.
I think that's very, very true. And as well, this might be the last technological development we ever see. I think
we're all going to get turned into paper clips.
Yeah, very possible. I mean, I think that there's a real end times feeling about a lot of these tools for industries and things like that. And I think that that's what's terrifying.
Well, I think obviously, look, there's a huge bet has been taken by the whole global economy really on this technology, and there are many people who have a great need for it to work, as you were describing earlier. And I think it's interesting that a lot of the way that they hype the products, again, just talking here about not your company but the bigger companies, is to use the language of doom.
Right.
Like, this stuff is so powerful, it's going to kill us all. Invest in my company. It's an interesting pitch when you think about it. I don't think that's true. I mean, I don't feel that AI has any kind of existential threat at all. I think that's just snake oil sales techniques, because at the end of the day, the one thing that these people always forget to talk about is motive. Of course, there'll be accidents involving AI, misunderstanding. I mean, by all accounts, the terrible, terrible incident in Iran with the girls' school being hit is a result of some kind of AI database error. And, we cannot be dismissive of the terrible human loss that has happened there, really because of our complacency when it comes to this technology. And again, as we said before, that's moving it into an area where everything else we're talking about is trivial. So let's move back to Sora, because it is an interesting thing. Do you have any inside track on it? I mean, obviously I'm not asking you to tell me anything confidential.
No,
because it was so strange. Because not only, as you say quite rightly, they've been hyping it up big time, but there was even a document released like the day before they announced the closure, talking about the next version that was coming out in the summer. So this seems to have been a decision which the people who are running Sora weren't privy to themselves. But what do you I mean, you talked kind of mockingly about how few people were using it. What do you think what does it signify?
I don't really know. I mean, the primary thing it signifies is that OpenAI is going for an IPO at the end of this year, and they need to be in businesses that are generating revenue. They can't be in, video models that are just eating cash for no good reason. And that's with the promise of Disney's, $1 billion investment. I think that, to me, I don't think that Disney is going to put, and again, I have no insider information, and this is my personal opinion. If Disney's obviously going through a management restructure, and they are, I think, planning to have some sort of, Disney Plus is now going to be this central hub for many experiences and whatever else. They had this idea that Sora, people were going to be able to prompt with about or use about 350 of their characters. And then they were going to sort of crowdsource that and go, okay, of these things, what's good? And they will then curate it and put it, or maybe they'll rank it, who knows? But the idea of people being able to prompt and then have the curatorial blessing of being on a Disney Plus, that's quite powerful. And I don't think that they'll stop that. I suspect that they see that as something they want to try. I don't think that they're assured that it will work, but I think that they're in a try and fail space at the moment. And I think that that's sort of what Sora was. And it's a very, at doing what it does, it's a very good model. But I think it just shows how quickly, these models need to pivot towards revenue. And I think that that's, again, underscores my thing about how I don't think we can trust them until
I mean, it's curious because I hear you, and honestly, you know more about this than I do. But it does seem to me that if you are headed towards the massive IPO at the end of the year, this is a red flag. I mean, the failure of something in which you've invested so much money, talked about as being a major plank of your activity, suddenly pulling the plug on it in this way, it doesn't exactly inspire confidence when they set out their plans for sort of taking over everything else. So in that sense, it feels like there must have been something slightly more than that. And I wonder if it speaks to the relationship with Disney.
No, I wouldn't think so. I think it's more that everybody they have to talk to at the moment are investors, who have, profit and loss statements in their eyeballs constantly. And so I think they just need to tell a better story that's about revenue, because Anthropic is beating them on the revenue story. They went for enterprise. They didn't do a video model. They focused on enterprise, and now they have a huge portion of the enterprise market. I think upwards of 75%. Or we should probably fact check that. And OpenAI as well, with people boycotting OpenAI and moving over to Claude after the Pentagon debacle. I think they were seeing, oh dear, we're not number one anymore, and we have an absurd evaluation. Anthropic is at about a $350 billion valuation at the moment. Again, we should fact check that. But
you can do your own fact checking.
Okay, all right. But and OpenAI has raised so much money so fast, they're going to have to IPO at $1.2 trillion. I mean, that's an absurd situation to be in when you've only got $20 billion of revenue.
Well, it absolutely is. And again, it speaks to a huge bubble, which is clearly either going to burst or deflate. And we can only hope for an organized deflation rather than a sudden bursting, which on the face of it seems more likely.
Well, I do think it is more likely. And what they're going to do is they're going to offset that risk onto the retail investor. Right now, when it IPOs, the Andreessen Horowitzes of the world and Bain Capitals are going to cash in their chips 6 months later, and they are going to get out And if that story breaks down, that consumer-facing story breaks down in terms of, oh, we will be profitable enough soon, there will be a crash very similar to the dot-com crash.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think most analysts feel that that's on the horizon. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when and how severe.
I think OpenAI might be the catalyst.
I think OpenAI might be the catalyst too. I mean, they're looking fairly desperate, and that's never a good look in the financial world. I think coming back to the idea of what Disney had in mind for Sora and whether Disney go ahead with it themselves in terms of creating, for want of a better word, sort of playground where people can make video fan fiction. I think they're really forgetting how mischievous people are. I think we're going to see a lot of mouse on duck action, if you get my drift. And I think that could be one of the reasons why, perhaps with the people who are the early adopters, they're kind of going, I'm not sure this is content we want to be encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, very possibly they do a lot of protection against those sorts of things. I mean, their content filtering aspect of their role is pretty well developed. Yeah, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
For sure, yeah.
It was just an amusing sidebar.
Right,
It wasn't really a question.
Mouse on duck action is an interesting mental image to have for the rest of this chat.
So, I mean, we've covered a lot of ground already, and it is really interesting to hear your perspective. Let's end with some thoughts about where you expect all of this to be in, let's say, around a decade from now. Because if we look back a decade, none of this existed, except in the most basic rudimentary way, because that takes us to 2016. If we go to 2036, what are you expecting the AI landscape to look like in general terms? And also, let's bring it back to you and your company. What would you expect your company's core activity to be by then? In fact, why don't you run with the second one first?
I expect our core activity to be incredibly dull, actually. I expect it to be, very much we do a lot of workflow solutions. We do a lot of activating data and helping creative companies figure out their data posture and create the data schemas that allow them to access their data with Gen AI or machine learning tools. But I think a lot of people will have done that by then. And I think that we'll look very similar to a run-of-the-mill IT company. And I think a lot of people will be building a lot of their own software internally. So, our now 35-person plus engineering team might, they might create their own apps and go off and do SaaS products. I think that in terms of the landscape of the tooling, the landscape of our cultural heritage, in terms of the landscape of, from the perspective of human rights, finances, whatever else, I have absolutely zero idea. And that's why the thing I'm lobbying for is just good, smart, ethical people to be at the table as fast as possible, because in 5 years, I desperately want people I respect who have earned their creds to be the ones in the room making decisions. I mean, at the end of the day, decisions are made by the people who show up. And I think that I just want those people in the room. You only have to remodel a bathroom to understand how responsible the advertising community is. We stressed over ever going over budget. We stressed over ever not delivering on time. Everybody regulates each other, and we're all diligent, hardworking people. I want those people in the room. I know there's this sort of conception outside our industry that everybody's a dilettante and everybody's, just frou-frou and away with the fairies. But I've known this industry to be full of incredibly diligent, hardworking people, and I want them to have the biggest voices at the table in 5 years. And so I really don't know what that looks like. I only know that if they don't have a seat at the table, if they're not picking up these tools and figuring out what it means to protect the industries, that just makes me sad. And I worry more about what that could mean for both the creative industries and the world at large.
And I mean, to some extent, you've answered within the relatively narrow scope of
Mm-hmm.
the creative industries. But given that you are, quite expert in broader terms, what do you think there's any chance that the various models which have been built on stolen IP will be forced to dismantle and start over?
No, I don't think there's any risk of that. I think that, Anthropic
I wouldn't call it a risk.
No, exactly. There's no hope of that.
Fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. There's no hope of that. I think that Anthropic had to write off a huge settlement because it was deemed that by using the Books 3 corpus, they had pirated a lot of work, and that actually if they had bought the books and if they could prove that they had receipts of books they had bought, those books were allowed to be in there. Again, I still think that's a pretty nasty way to view fair use, because what they said was when a human reads a book, it's in there. Absolutely not in the same way that it's in a language model. They can quote it back. You can say, give me this, but 10% different, just different enough, and it'll be able to do it. I'm not able to do that. So I take a dim view of that, but I don't think there's any hope of that.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect, and this is where I'm not being optimistic, that you may very well be right. But I hope that we are able to. I mean, as you have said, both today and you said it very clearly on the stage last week. These people have perpetrated the greatest IP theft of all time.
100%.
In the course of human history, when great wrongnesses have happened, we have had the moral fiber to reverse those things. This is why we don't have children cleaning chimneys anymore.
Right.
And so I remain hopeful that there could be a day of reckoning. But I'm not filled with optimism. I mean, have you seen the UK government report on the creative industries that came out this week? It's incredibly wishy-washy.
Right.
Essentially, there was great hopes that they were going to make some significant, put in place, or at least plan to put in place some significant protections for the creative industries.
Right.
And they've done no such thing. No. And I think, this speaks to your point. Governments are afraid of stalling the AI beast. Yeah. And they are giving that, making that a higher priority than looking after and enabling creatives to look after their own assets. And that doesn't bode well for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we just have to look at the geopolitical situation we're in, and there's a real feeling that if you're not supporting this tool and sort of weaponizing it, you're not doing right by your country. And I think that we're seeing a moment where the European Union just kind of said, we're not even really sure we want to be on AWS infrastructure anymore or Microsoft infrastructure anymore. I mean, the cloud infrastructure of America has been the cloud infrastructure of Europe, for a very long time. And people are going, we're not sure we're cool with that relationship anymore. We might need to build our own cloud services. So I think that there's, again, a real fear that somebody else who's malignant against our way of life, a nation state or worse, will get to AGI before us. And we've already seen the weaponization, and this is when I say they're powerful and dangerous technologies. I mean, the weaponization in terms of misinformation, the weaponization of social media in general, I think is something we have to kind of pay attention to. But, I think that now that's going to go to software and hacking on a much more granular level. It's not just going to be nation states that are going to have the ability to hack government and vital infrastructure of countries. So, I do feel a little bit like AI pours gasoline on a fire that we're still trying to contain in social media. maybe it can be the tool of fighting back. I don't know, but again, I think it's all the more important that people who we trust, that we believe, start picking up these tools as fast as possible, because I think that ethical people being in the game and not running from it,
we'll
I
have
think
to
is
prize
important.
them out of the cold, dead hands of the plutocrats, won't we? So
Probably true.
Actually, since you raised the spectre of AGI, let's make the very last question about that, because we were talking there about what might be the case in 2036. Do you have a view on the likelihood of AGI being achieved?
I do think so. I don't think I'm smart enough to know what that means. I do think that AGI will be able to look at a computer and do all manner of things. I think that we're also running very fast into robotics. So much of what we talk about is multimodal tools. Their purpose is not just to generate funny cat videos in Sora. It's to understand the world around them, and be able to understand the physics of the world around them, be able to catch a ball in midair. And that's the robotics revolution, is what's coming. And so AGI being able to move within computers is one thing. AGI that now has the ability to be in robots that are physical and stronger than us, and those sorts of things. I mean, I'm sounding
you're not sounding
very
so
defeated.
optimistic
No,
now.
exactly. And I think that's the thing. But I think that that's the struggle we are always in as humans, is that balance between fear and optimism. And Obama said a thing where he says, history is long, and more often than not, it bends to the right, or bends towards what's right.
I think it's Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes.
The arc of justice is long, and it bends towards justice. Yes.
So,
but yeah, I mean, it's interesting, actually. Let's end perhaps with a comforting thought from Dr. Cory Doctorow, who is brilliant on all of this, a huge AI skeptic, and the guy who we're indebted for the term enshittification for. And he said of AGI, and I think he's right about this, and he doesn't. I don't think, and I can't speak for him, but I don't think he rules it out as a theoretical possibility. But what he does say is that it won't be achieved in the current trajectory, because evolving AI systems is like breeding racehorses to be faster and faster, and then suddenly expecting one of them to become a Ferrari. Right. And I think he's right about that. I don't think we're on that trajectory. But what would I know?
I mean, Jensen Huang said a funny thing the other day where he said, I think we've achieved AGI.
Really?
You're like, what does that even mean? That's like, what do we do? What do I do with that? Like,
Yeah. On that sinister note.
Yes. Well, thanks, Jason. I really appreciate you having this chat with me.
Thank you, Orlando.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.